You'll just have to unmute your microphone.
Okay, let me see. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, I am a director of a secondary and vocational school in Puerto Rico. It's a private school, and we deal with high school students and post-secondary students.
That's fantastic. That's really fantastic. Thank you so much for being online. I was actually very interested in working with the university. I had a grant out that we were trying to get funded by NASA to work with the university using Mosquito Habitat Mapper after the hurricane. And unfortunately, it did not get funded, but citizen science is something where you do not need funding to get it going. So we're hoping that this might be a way that we can also support Puerto Rico.
Thank you. We would like to get our students involved in any science projects that you might have that we can do here in Puerto Rico. So just let me know, and we'll get the help we need, and we'll do it.
Excellent. Well, we've got a lot of resources, educational resources for you, Cesar, and you know, I put my email up on the chat. You are free to contact me directly, or also go through the website, which Cassie will be talking about a little bit later during this webinar.
Thank you very much.
Great. I don't know if Janet, if you're on to introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Janet Vale. I'm from Grand Valley State University, and we're on our 3rd day of closure. Tomorrow will be the 4th.
And I'm sorry, and what state is that in?
Michigan.
Grand Valley, of course it is. Yeah, good. Oh my gosh. I have friends in Minnesota, and they told me that it was like 29 below Fahrenheit.
Well, we've had constant lake effect snow since Monday.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. It's really great to have you here. It would also be great, because we're going to start in just a few minutes, if those of you online would just say who you are and where you work, or why you're interested in this webinar. One of the things we want to do is we want to tailor what we do to the audience that we have. So it'd be great to have more info. Frigid 65 degrees in St. Peter. I saw actually there was something on social media that there was a 100-degree difference between Minnesota and Florida today, which is pretty extreme. You would think that would make for some interesting weather, having those temperature differences. So we're right at the start time. I'd like to honor your time by starting on time. How's that? And I'd like to welcome you to the very first introductory GLOBE Mission Mosquito webinar, specifically for people who are in the public that are citizen scientists, as well as people who maybe work in outreach and education that would like to do some science with their participants. And we will also be talking a little bit later about some of the other kinds of materials and activities we have to support you. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is move to the next slide, and Cassie is going to be our here. And this is our agenda for the next 45 minutes or so. What I'd like to do is first introduce the GLOBE Mosquito Campaign and meet the team, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the project and how you can get involved in any way that suits your interests, time, abilities, and if you work with people who you work with. So let's first by starting to meet the team, and I'd like to introduce the coordinator of GLOBE Mission Mosquito Campaign. That is Ms. Dorian Janney. Dorian, would you just say a little bit about not only just saying who you are, but also talk just a teeny bit about the other series of webinars, because we do have a couple teachers on here as well.
Greetings. So hi. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up? Awesome. I'm Dorian Janney, and I am the education lead for the GLOBE Mission Mosquito Field Campaign. And we have once a month, we have webinars that are actually, I would think that they're not just something that's useful to teachers, that they're also useful to anyone who is using the Mosquito Habitat Mapper and wants to learn more. We call them the formal education webinars because we make sure that we have teachers and students who are presenting and telling how they're using the Mosquito Habitat Mapper in their classroom or with science fair experiments that they're doing. But we also go over some of the fundamentals of how to use the Mosquito Habitat Mapper. Next time we're going to be focusing more on students and teachers that are using the Mosquito Habitat Mapper for science investigations. But then in March, we'll be talking about what you can start to do to prepare for active mosquito season, how you can make the larval trap, and some of the ways in which you might want to motivate people and yourself to go out and take pictures of potential mosquito habitats even before mosquitoes are active. So lots of ways that you can get involved, as Rusty said. And in the formal education webinars, which are once a month as well, we kind of stagger so that they're sometimes every other week, sometimes a little closer than that. But in any case, you will learn more about how to use the app. If you are an educator and you are using the app and you would like to present during one of our webinars, we'd love to have you.
All right, thank you so much, Dorian. I'd also now like to invite Cassie, who is our lead educator on this project.
Hi, I'm Cassie Sofing. I'm actually based out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I work with both Dorian, obviously, and Rusty on Mission Mosquito. I'm the one that takes care of the web page and will send out invitations for the webinars. And if you have any difficulty with the app, I'm the one that you could contact also.
Thank you so much, Cassie. And then just to introduce myself, my name is Rasen Lowe, and I am the, I guess I'm the official science lead for GLOBE Mosquito Habitat Mapper. I worked with a couple colleagues of mine in the development of the app, and we tested the app, and now the app is now available, and Cassie's going to tell you where to find it in your app store. So without further ado, let's now move on to our first slide. Okay, so we just introduced the fact that we have GLOBE is, I know that some people here are part of the GLOBE program. I recognized Michael on this line here, but we do have, there is the GLOBE Observer, is the citizen science component of the GLOBE program, which has been around for more than 20 years. It's been focused on K-12 education. And GLOBE Observer actually arose as a really very organically, because since GLOBE has been around for so long, we have lots of participants that say, hey, I've aged out of GLOBE, I still want to do this. And after a few years, technology finally caught up with us, and we were able to then expand the program to any citizen scientist who is interested in observing the world around them and participating in science by providing their observations to a database that then can be used by themselves or anyone else to better understand the world around us. So that's what we do with GLOBE, GLOBE Observer. And what we're talking about here is one of the 3 apps that we have currently on the GLOBE Observer platform, which is GLOBE Mission Mosquito. Next one, please. So go ahead and tap these all the way through, Cassie. So basically, the idea behind Mission Mosquito Campaign is that we, you probably know that mosquitoes are a huge problem. You probably also know that mosquitoes are responsible for more deaths in humans than any other animal. They are a huge health problem in many parts of the world. And with the changes in climate, it's now becoming a very serious problem also in North America. And so our idea was, not only can we monitor basically changes in the Earth system by looking at a series of organisms, but we can also maybe collect data that can be used by health officials or by our mosquito control agencies, and then these data then can be used to find, for instance, if you have the first appearance of an invasive species in your region, a citizen scientist might be able to find that. In fact, we have a couple examples of that actually happening. it's really important. It's a really, really important campaign, not only from a health perspective, but also from a science perspective. And we're going to get into all those things later. Okay, next. So what we're going to do, and go ahead and go to the next slide, Cassie. What we're trying to do here, though, is, you know, with any science activity, you're going to learn a lot about the environment around you. You're going to learn a little bit about mosquito biology, and it provides an opportunity for anyone to connect with their community and provide a greater good, which is to identify those mosquito habitat sites where mosquitoes breed. And if we can find them, report them to people who are authorities that can actually use them in their modeling or in their plans for mitigation. That's really fantastic. We also are asking people, when they find the mosquito habitat sites, if it's possible to mitigate it yourself. So for instance, a couple of the mosquitoes that we are finding a lot of problems with respect to West Nile virus, with a suite of diseases such as chikungunya and Zika and some of these other diseases that we're now finding happening in the southern part of the US. These kinds of mosquitoes tend to breed in containers. So if you have a container that has mosquito in it, we ask you to dump out the water or put a cover over it or put a net over it and render that particular place unavailable for the mom mosquitoes that need to have a nursery. So anyway, that is basically the health part behind that, but we're also going to now talk a little bit also about why this science is really important for NASA. So most importantly, as a project, we are all together as citizen scientists. We're all partners, we're all contributors, and just like many citizen science programs, we're asking people to take part in whatever part they want to. Some folks, maybe little kids, are only interested in collecting data and reporting it. Other people may be interested in downloading the data and doing their own analyses or working together with mosquito control agencies or public health officials in their area. So there's lots of different ways that this can be taken to a step further. But we're going to start now at the very basics. So let's go to the next slide, please. So most important is, I think most people now have noticed, but we put this in here because if you've never used Zoom before, you may not see that at the very bottom of your screen there is a chat. And if you click on that, you'll be able to ask any questions, make any comments. We really want to hear from you, and there's two of us monitoring this channel. So while I'm talking, Cassie's reading. While Cassie's talking, I'm reading. And we're going to be able, we hope to have a dynamic, interactive environment during the next 30 minutes. Okay, next one. So we've talked already about how mosquitoes are really important to health. And you know, one of the things that interested me when I started getting involved with this project was the fact that mosquitoes really influential throughout human history. And there's a bunch of very exciting and interesting books that we'll let you know about. This is one of them by Sonia Shaw, The Fever. And it really talks about how if you want to look back at history and you factor in mosquitoes, you can see that mosquitoes really played a role in Roman conquest and in the colonization of the New World and all these different things. So it's really fascinating. So I hope you'll be able to take a look at some of that. But what I thought I would do today, and let's take the next slide, Cassie, is talk a little bit about mosquitoes, because people have always asked me, you know, why is NASA interested in mosquitoes? You know, NASA studies space, right? They have, we have these remote sensing satellites that are up in space. They are providing us with data about temperature, about air quality, about precipitation. There are so many factors that are being sensed. And so what's very interesting is, you know, we can't sense mosquitoes from space. But what we can do is we can sense the environmental parameters that we know where mosquitoes thrive. And so these satellite measurements from NASA are being used to develop models that help people predict, or I guess not predict necessarily, but project when there might possibly be an epidemic so that people can protect themselves from it. So it's really, this is why NASA thinks this is such a great idea. And I thought this slide here really shows that really well. Okay, next one, please. So here is this is just a screenshot to show you what the Globe Observer app looks like. Cassie's going to talk about how you can download that in just a minute. And this is what when you go to the app, you'll see that right now there are 3 apps. We're going to have another one coming up very soon, which is going to be looking at tree height. But right now, Mosquito Habitat Mapper is the second one on the list. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about here is how this is kind of a weird little picture, and it's a little bit with here. So, you know, the story of mosquitoes, it's really a climate story, and it's a human history story. And what I thought I would do in the next, say, 5 or 6 minutes is sort of fill in the blanks and talk about why in geological history mosquitoes are so interesting, and how the geological history and the climate history and the human history has brought us the problems we have with mosquitoes today. So what you'll see here is a time series. It's 6 maps of Africa. And if you look at the legend, you'll see that there's big changes that happen from the end of the ice ages and beginning of the Holocene, which is about 12,000 years ago, up to present day. And what you will see if you look in the upper right, that 8,000 to 7,000 years ago, there was no desert. The Sahara Desert was completely gone. So at this period of time, we have a lot of moisture all the way across Africa. And what that means, of course, is that mosquitoes then have a habitat that goes all the way across northern Africa. And you'll see that if you move a little bit further along to about 5,000 years ago, then it begins to become semi-desert, and then by today we once again have a Sahara Desert again. So there was a brief period of time where mosquitoes were found everywhere. The mosquito that we're going to be talking about was found everywhere in Africa. All right, I don't know what it is. If that happens again, I'm going to move to a different place where maybe I'm not quite so stable. But anyway, let's move to the next slide, Cassie. Okay, so did you guys get the story about how 8,000 years ago there were mosquitoes all the way across Africa, right? Did you get that part? All right, so here's a close-up of Africa. And what you'll see here, this is the very northeast corner of Egypt. And what you'll see in the first picture is before it got wet. This is pictures of human habitations. And this shows why climate and humans work together in the mosquito story. So, you know, when it was really dry and we had a Sahara Desert, people could only colonize in the river valleys where there was moisture. Okay, so that's the left picture. In the middle picture, we're now at that time where there was no Sahara. And what you'll see is there's now archaeological sites spread out all the way across the northern part of Africa, which is now the Sahara. But then, once that wet era ended, people began to coalesce again and find themselves once again in river valleys. And so what's very interesting about this is that if people are responding to changes in climate, all the other organisms are also responding to that as well, right? So what happens with the mosquitoes is as the climate shifted and their range contracted, they began to contract into the same places that people were found. And what this caused, it caused a symbiotic relationship between the two species. Okay, more parasitic, but it's the two species are working together, humans and mosquitoes. So let's go to the next slide. And this is what has happened. So you have people now that are living in Africa, and the mosquitoes are now living in the same places that people are. And what this means is that these mosquitoes that previously had lived in holes in trees, they're what they call tree hole mosquitoes. We're talking about one species, which is the yellow fever mosquito, which we call Aedes aegypti. And this mosquito all across Africa was living in holes of trees and in natural environments. When they began to live close to people, they actually adapted, and they began to preferentially lay their eggs in clay containers and in containers that people made, in manufactured containers. And so to this day, this particular mosquito, the Aedes aegypti mosquito, is a mosquito that preferentially lives near people. And it's because of the geological history and the climate history. And so that's why this particular mosquito, the yellow fever mosquito, is the mosquito that is now such a very serious problem for human health all around the world. So we have a all across the world, we have a problem in the tropics and subtropics and the humid subtropics with this particular specimen. But the story doesn't end there, because they like to live in containers, right? This is also the time where we had a lot of transport and movement of peoples from the old world to the new world. And part of this was explorers, part of this was slave trade. But what was happening with respect to mosquitoes is they were finding a great way to hitchhike across the ocean to North America in the containers that people had for water and food. So as a result, this mosquito that was once found only in Africa, primarily in Egypt and in Western Africa, is now found specifically all over the world because of this transport. And so this is the way that mosquitoes have now piggybacked, I guess, on humans. And then there are other mosquitoes as well. So if you look over here on the map, you'll see there's some tires that are on a barge. There's another species of mosquito that carries the same diseases as the yellow fever mosquito. This is called the Asian tiger mosquito, or Aedes albopictus. They are hitchhikers too. We know from the 1970s that when we started the trade in used tires are a fantastic natural nursery for mosquitoes. And so that the Aedes albopictus mosquito made itself all the way across the world. And if you're wondering how we know these details, we know it from genetics. So we know that the genetics that we have done from the Aedes aegypti mosquito, we know they all came from one place at approximately the same time, and approximately probably about 300 years ago, from Africa to the New World. Because there's lots of other variants in other parts of the world, but they are not the same genetically. So that's our story. So people were responsible for the spread of these mosquitoes. These mosquitoes became really a serious problem for people because they began to live amongst people preferentially. For instance, the Asian tiger mosquito and the yellow fever mosquitoes, which are respectively Aedes albopictus, they just want to be around people. And even today now, we have another problem, which I'll just mention very briefly, which is the Zika virus. And the Zika virus is the very first mosquito-borne disease that we have identified where it can be spread by fluids, human fluids. And as a result, a traveler that has the Zika virus in them can travel in a plane to another area.
Yes, and we have a couple of questions. I wonder if you want to pause and take a look at them.
I will. It's a good time. Sure. All right. Let's see. What are the questions?
Do humans taste better to mosquitoes than other animals? And if so, how do we know? Or why?
Rachel, that's a great question. It does relate to my story I've just told. And the answer is for Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, which are the mosquitoes from Africa, they definitely prefer humans. We taste better to them for whatever reason. And that is, once again, it's because they co-evolved together. With the Aedes albopictus, which is a mosquito that comes from Asia, the Asian tiger mosquito, they are less poised for people. They are happy to bite your dog or a pig or a cow or a bird. And as a result, even though both of them can carry the same diseases, the Aedes aegypti, the African mosquito, is a much more effective vector because it tends to just bite people to people to people, whereas the albopictus mosquito thinks all other animals taste just as good. So it's a really good question. It's species specific. And the reason why, I could get into that a little bit, but it's because of the chemoreceptors they have. And they're looking for things like, the chemoreceptors are looking for a lot of different things, but one of the things they look for is CO2. Another thing is lactic acid. And so people are big, so we have more of that exuding from us than, say, a bird. And so that's why they'll find us. So that's a pretty simple answer to a pretty complex question.
And how do we know that ancient mosquitoes laid eggs in clay vessels?
That is such a good question. That is such a good question. And actually, I don't know, we actually have, archaeological evidence of that, but we do know that that the mosquitoes were choosing those particular vessels very early on. And that's the kind of vessel they have today. And so it has been extrapolated into the past. So that would be the reason why when we had water vessels that were going across, that's why they would be preferentially found there. If they were still tree hole mosquitoes, they would have never made it to the New World. So that's the answer. And and it's say that this is once again we're talking about their preference. There's going to be the odd mosquito that can't find a clay vessel or can't find a pot, made by people, and they are not going to not lay eggs. They will go and find a natural site. So you'll still find them in natural sites sometimes. Okay, so Larissa said, yes, we are recording this session, so you can catch it later so you can get back to your class. Okay, thanks. So should we just keep going now? I'm sort of lost my time and I don't know where we are in my schedule because everything got messed up, but let's move on to the next slide. I just wanted to just show you here, this is a map of habitat suitability. And like I said, we're finding these particular mosquitoes, the Aedes aegypti, Aedes albopictus, the one from Africa and the one from Southeast Asia. These mosquitoes are found in what we call the tropics and the humid subtropics. And you'll see on this map that there are places that are red, which are suitable only for the African mosquito. The orange is where you can find both the African and the Southeast Asian mosquito, and yellow is only the Southeast Asian mosquito. So you can see that the Aedes albopictus, the Southeast Asian mosquito, is actually expanding at a great rate in the northern part of the US because they have slightly different environmental tolerance parameters than the Aedes aegypti does. And so we're seeing its expansion much more rapidly than Aedes aegypti. But what you'll see is the whole central girdle of the world. You can see that they are found now on every basically on every continent except for Greenland, and it's a real problem. Okay, so next one, please. Okay, so this is just to let you know, if you are in the US, and I don't know if we have international folks on this webinar or not, but this will let you know why this is such important work. And this is a really, really complicated diagram, but it shows you basically where we expect, and this is 2016, so it's it's a 2017 publication, so it's just a couple years old, but it shows you where we expect to find Aedes aegypti and where we expect to find Aedes albopictus. And you'll see that there is approximate, you'll see a line which shows the maximum extent that we expect to see in current climate. As the climate warms, that's going to move northward. But there are places, for instance, it says here in Denver, I'm looking at Colorado right now, and I know that there has been one Aedes aegypti specimen that's been collected here. It was collected by a friend of mine, and he collected it. So it was kind of an outlier, but he is a mosquito person, so it's definitely correct. So we're seeing slow movement of these different species into other habitats. And it's going to be very helpful if we could get a lot of people just looking at mosquitoes occasionally to help us understand this rapid invasion of these species into different areas, because they do carry diseases. And right now, where, if you are an epidemiologist, you'd probably know that diseases go up and down over time. You have you hit a time where you have an epidemic, and then these epidemics usually cancel themselves out. You have a couple of years hiatus, and we come back up again. So people became very interested in mosquitoes, and we decided to build the app during the Zika outbreak in 2015. And we are now, several years out from that, but we would expect to have another outbreak of a disease like that coming in the near future. And so if we're all prepared, we'll be able to assist in the mitigation of this problem. Okay, next one. Oh, and could you go back, Cassie, because I forgot to say one thing. Okay, you saw on the right-hand side that precipitation, humidity, and surface temperature was rolling. And that was to remind me that those are three of the parameters that are being collected by satellites. And so so that data then will help, it's those data that help us understand where we could potentially have mosquitoes. But what we need to know is, where are they actually? So the satellite data cannot work on its own. We need to have that on the ground data. And that's why we have so many wonderful people who are working in public health and in our mosquito surveillance systems. Okay, next one. So I think this is a place where, Cassie, you can begin talking a little bit about the app and how it works. I hope you, if you have any more questions about the history of this stuff, I started out as a paleoclimatologist, so I kind of brought that to this problem. It's the most interesting thing for me. It probably isn't the most interesting thing for you. But if you're interested in climate and in mosquitoes and in people, it just shows you that this is not something we've made up. It's been around for a long time, and we can talk about it for the last 5,000 years. Cassie, tell us about the app.
Well, thanks, Rusty. I have more information for the app in a few screens from here, but basically the app is free download from the App Store or Google Play Store. We're using it if you're in a library or a museum and you want to just go, or citizen science, you want to go out and capture some data, your phone is perfectly good for documenting potential breeding habitats. And if you want to go one step further, you'd need a magnifier for your phone to grab a good picture of mosquito larvae. But we'll get to that in just a minute. Rusty, we want to kind of, to wrap up your background.
There's a couple more slides. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So using that app, we've been now, the app was released at last May. So May 2017 is when it came out. So we have now been collecting data for about a year. And you'll see all these red dots are where we have mosquito data. This picture is just to show you that when you go to this database, which is available on the web to anyone who wants to look at it, you don't have to be part of our research team as a citizen scientist, but you can see that if you clicked on any one of these dots, you will get some metadata that will show you where and what kind of habitat was found. And also a picture of the mosquito, the tail end, which is the part the terminal end, which is what we use in our identification. And also, and this is what's really exciting, we've been working also with some colleagues in Brazil and Peru. And what's very exciting for them is with this map, there's a bunch of tiles, right? And if you go into the tiles, you can see that you can actually get a street view of where the mosquitoes are found. And so this is also gives you very precise information. So this is our globe visualization system, and we'll be presenting that in more detail in the next webinar. Okay, next one, please. And what I'd like to do next time, if you are so inclined, one of the things that I think would be very, very interesting, and it's never been done before, is we'd like to create a mosquito emergence, map. So what we'd like people to do is to have citizen scientists around the U.S. Identify when they first spot mosquitoes. And that will provide us with a very specific map for 2019. This is a map that was developed based on USDA zones. And it also provides where we expect to have first appearance of mosquitoes. So for instance, our friend Chris, who's down in Florida, she probably already has some mosquitoes around, or they're going to show up really quickly. For those of us that are living in the northern part of Maine, it may not be till late May. But I think it'd be so great if we could have people scattered around the country making their observations, and then we could actually even publish, as a group of citizen scientists, we could publish a map of 2019 mosquito emergence. So we'll talk more about that project in our next webinar. And so why is NASA interested in your mosquito observations? This is someone using the app this is actually in a classroom, and she's looking at the mosquito and she's identifying whether or not it's one of the four mosquito vectors that are identified in our app. There's that satellite. Next one, please. And so, just once again, I said that, people don't, most people think about NASA, they think it studies space, they think about astronauts, but actually most of the work that NASA does is actually studying Earth from space, because it's our favorite planet. And so we want to help people at NASA who are collecting these measurements be able to apply these measurements to apply it to human health considerations. And that's really the place where our citizen science project is focused, is really at the crux of earth science and health. Okay, next one. And so here is a picture. I wanted to show this one just to show you what a mosquito larva looks like. When we ask people to go out and identify the mosquitoes, we're not asking people to identify live ones, because a live one can bite you. And if you got a disease because of participation in this project, it would be very, very bad. So we're not asking people to look at adult mosquitoes, but we're asking you to look at larvae. And larvae are not able to transmit diseases to humans. So let's just talk about how this data can be used. And it allows us to take those indirect measurements from space and then understand them in a very, very specific context in your neighborhood, in your community.
Rusty, for the timing of the first mosquitoes in the winter and spring, is that for all the species or just any of the three that we're concerned with?
That's a really good question. And the answer is we're interested in all mosquitoes right now. There are some similarities and some slight differences between their tolerances. If you are just going out and you see larvae and you decide not to identify them, we want that information too. It's going to be useful. That map that I showed you is just mosquitoes in general. But if we could come up with a map that says, hey, we're finding Aedes albopictus at this time, or Aedes aegypti at this time, that of course would be a real scientific contribution. So we're interested in all of them. Okay, thank you for that question. And I just wanted to throw this out here, that, it's really interesting if you read Nature or Science or some of these really heavy, really, really prestigious journals. What you see is that there are more and more authors on different kinds of science articles. And I've seen up to like 70 authors on an article. So there's no reason why we couldn't actually come up with a research project and all of us could be listed as participants in this project. So I just wanted to say that, it's just to let you know that, science is really changing. And I think that with citizen science, we're seeing the democratization of science so that everybody can participate. That also means everybody should get credit. That's what I think. And so I want to just throw that out there. Next one. Here's my summary. Where we find mosquitoes is related both to climate and human behavior, changes in climate and changes in human behavior, and also, of course, changes in the mosquito because of the evolutionary processes. NASA is interested in mosquitoes because they collect Earth system information from space. GLOBE observers are collecting comparable data on the ground. That can work together to ground truth the kinds of observations and models that come from space. So this is really, really exciting. And there's a big change happening right now in science. There is big questions can be answered with big data sets. We're now in the world of big data. And we've never been able to we never had the computational ability to work with these large, massive data sets that we have now. And that is one of the reasons why citizen science is now becoming so prominent and so popular, because even 5 or 6 years ago, we really didn't have the capability of doing this. We didn't have the apps so people could do this, with a device that they happen to have at home. And we didn't have the computers that could dish out that data in really, really large quantities. So So what we are now is we're really by participating in citizen science, you really are at the cusp of what's happening in science today. It's really kind of exciting. And that's one reason why I decided, and Cassie decided, and Dorian decided, and many of us have decided to get involved in citizen science at this point in our careers. Okay, great, I'm done. And I'm sorry, it did take about 5 minutes longer because of the problems we had with connectivity. I think only because we have a huge windstorm. My internet's been going in and out. I found that out from my husband as I went upstairs. Okay, Cassie, go ahead now, and let's talk about some of the real specificities of how to, how to get involved, how to get your account, how to download the app, and we'll get you started. Okay, thanks so much for your attention. I'll be right here if you have more questions.
Yes, thanks, Rusty. And if you do have questions, please type them in the chat. We're watching that, and they'll be archived. And I would like to point out that the GLOBE program is open for anyone to access it. You don't need an account to kind of browse through and see what is available. But the benefits of becoming a GLOBE observer / citizen scientist means that then you can contribute some data to our database, and that's what we'd really like. And so on the globe.gov site, if you go under the Get Started, which is right here, and you can see my mouse, right? Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay. If you go to the Get Started and then choose the GLOBE Observer Citizen Scientist part and choose to create an account, we only ask for your first and last name and an email, and you've set up an account. So when you check your email, you'll be getting a crazy random password. And for most of us, I don't know about you, but I can't remember crazy passwords. I have to create my own. So if you want to change it, the first thing I'd suggest then is to choose forget that you forgot your password. And then you can create your own password from there. Kind of a backwards way of getting in. And to get started then, you type in your email address, and if you don't know that password, choose forgot and change your password, and then you're ready to get started. So here's the login up here. If you're coming from any of the number of countries that are supported by GLOBE, you can choose to come in Spanish or Portuguese, and it works really easy that way. But again, change forget password. So that sets up your citizen science account. And from this point then, if you've downloaded the app, we can actually go out and start collecting some data. And so on the GLOBE Observer site, so it's observer.globe.gov, and all of our slides and this archive will be available within about 24 hours. So if you want to go back and check and see what did she say and how did she say to do it, you can definitely check from here. But on the Get the App, you can just go to the App Store or Google Play, depending on your smart device. It does work with iPads, it does work with tablets, and it does work with your smartphones. So you download the app, install it, and you're ready to go. So just to kind of go through with you what the app is all about, there's 4 data collection steps. And so the first one, and this will be in the app, and I'll kind of go through that in a moment with you, but after you've logged in, it's going to say, okay, here's the date and time and your latitude and longitude. And the screen is interactive, so if you're not quite where you want to be, you can actually move it around. So it's looking for your particular location where you're taking that observation from. Now, next step is you're going to take a look at, okay, where's my water sample? We're looking for potential breeding habitats. So if it's an artificial container, or if it's a natural body of water, it goes through, it's all run by icons and screens, so you just click the one that matches up with where you're at. And so we want you to sample the water. If you're in a museum or a science center, suggestion would be to have, and we'll talk about making mosquito traps at our next webinar, but you could simply put a small container of water in different corners, perhaps of your library or museum. Could be outside around the corners of your building. If you're recommending to your folks that they could go home and do it, they could put them around the corners of their houses, again, depending on the time of year. And then you simply check the traps every week to see if there's any activity. You're looking for the larvae, and so you do a sample, and then you're going to count how many do you see in your sample. Report that information, and you could be done at that point. If you want to go one step further, if you have a clip-on magnifier that you can buy for about $5 on Amazon or eBay, and we don't recommend a particular vendor, but just in general, if you use the search term for clip-on magnifier, you'll get a variety of choices. With that, then, you can actually zoom in and with your phone or your tablet, take a much closer and detailed picture of the larvae. And that's what Rusty alluded to, is we're taking a look at specific features that are on the tail section of the larvae. And then you make your best guess. And at the end, thank you very much. And I'm still a frog egg. I haven't completed many observations yet, but kind of some motivation to continue on. And so those would be the 4 steps. And if it's a container that you can safely dump the water out, we would encourage that. If it's like the rain gutters on our houses in the Midwest are perfect places for water to collect, and mosquitoes have a great quiet place to lay their eggs. So you could, flush out your rain gutters, empty bird baths, dog bowls. It could be a project where you have kids cleaning up trash around your schoolyard or your museum or library, and they found it in a bottle cap. So if you can, again, dump out the water, that would be great. Are there any questions so far? And you can unmute yourself and we can chat. That's fine too.
I think this has been a really great overview, Cassie. And I think that it'd be great if anybody has any questions before we move forward, just about using the habitat mapper. That would be really a good place now to mention that.
I have logged in, and up at the top, you can see that it says log out csofing@hotmail.com if I wanted to. Oops. And I can change users. So for libraries or museums that have multiple smart devices, you can have different logins. You could create independent email accounts for people and get that all set up. So basically, it goes through some information. It's showing, again, the 4 steps, just as a review. And then what we're doing, again, making sure that you have permission to be on somebody's land if you're out in the field someplace, wearing protective clothing if you need to, and then getting an inexpensive magnifier. If you are doing this on your own and you don't want to see that information again, you can check the box, do not show again, and you won't see it. But for training, I always keep it on. And here we go. We're ready to start with our first mosquito observation. And I mentioned that it's super easy to...
Rusty, there's several questions in the chat, so maybe you could take a look at those while Cassie's getting set up.
Yep. I've been answering those questions. But there are some really great ones here. Like Rachel made a question about the life cycle and how long it is. And of course, like with anything in science, there's no exact answer, because a mosquito is going to develop from an egg to an adult according to what this situation is. So for instance, a mosquito could lay an egg, and the Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus mosquitoes, they lay their eggs right above water because they're really, really smart genetically or evolutionarily. And so what happens is the eggs can sit there for a year until such time as there is water. And then when it rains, the water level rises. It inundates the egg. Within 24 hours, it becomes a larva. And if the temperature is right and there's enough food, they're going to mature into adults in less than 2 weeks. So in the tropics, it could be as little as 3 to 4 days. And in the U.S., in the humid subtropics and northern latitudes, it could be 2 or 3 weeks. But it really depends on the environmental variables. So that's a really good question. Someone else asked, how often would we like you to make measurements? And what I wanted to say there is that I want people to make measurements as often as they think it's fun and as much as they think it's interesting, because it shouldn't be a burden. It shouldn't be something you go, oh shoot, I've got to make measurements. You know, in an ideal world, we would love to have, especially during the time we're making the phenological map, it would be great if people would be making measurements once a week. And so we hope some citizen scientists be willing to do that. But we also recognize that some people are going to be interacting with the app through a library or a museum program, and they may only do it once. And it doesn't matter, because all the data that's being collected is going to be useful. So I hope that answers that question. And here's a really good question. Megan just asked how young of an audience can record data. This is a really good question, because we actually did a lot of beta testing of the app when we were in Peru and Brazil. And we initially thought this would be something for upper middle school kids to high school kids as maybe the lower level. And what we found is that elementary students really, once their reading skills are good enough, they love to use the app. And you know, anybody can make the observations, but they might need someone to help them actually enter the data. But a young person can easily find the mosquito larvae. And in fact, when we first tested this app, I was working in Barbuda, which is in the Caribbean, and we were working with elementary kids. And I was saying, well, you know, do you know where the mosquitoes are? And they go, oh, you mean wigglers? They call them wigglers there. And the kids, who were like maybe, I'm thinking 8 years old, they took me to a place where they like to look for wigglers. So there really is no lower level of people who can say, hey, I found some mosquito larvae, but they have to be able to use the app.
So I've logged in, and I do apologize. This is the first screen that you'll get to, and it automatically populates it with the date and time and your location. And you can zoom into your location. And again, you just click on next. And I mentioned that it works with icons. And so basically you're looking for, is it a still, is it flowing, a container artificial, or a container natural? And so we're looking, as you're looking around, you simply pick the one that matches the best, and it could be other, but if it's an item or trash or a storage container, and then you kind of drill down a little bit deeper until you pick what you're looking at, and then you photograph the site. Even if you're not on Wi-Fi, you can do all of this data collection, and I'll show you what happens when you get back to the end then. But we can skip the photos, and you can go to the next. And if we're not sure of what something is, if a wiggler or a larvae, you can play the video. And
there they are.
Embedded in the app are some videos that you can go out and to use. So you've got in the field learning. And so I'm answering questions, whether it's a yes or no. Do I want to perform a count? And so again, out of that sample of water that you have, yes, I want to do a count. There's some tips on sampling, how to get the water out. How many do you see? And it's an estimate or exact, depends on your sample. And then, do I see eggs? Do I have any adult mosquitoes around? And you can enter in the comments then too, and that becomes part of your metadata. So I don't have anything. And I'm going to save what I've got. I can save my observations now and come back. Do I want to save them? Yep. Now here's where you're back at the screen. So let's say I didn't have Wi-Fi, I'm out in the field, and now I'm ready. I can actually select my observation, and I can send it up to GLOBE at this point. If I want to make an edit or change, I would click on the pencil. If I want to throw it away, if I was just doing a demonstration, then I could throw it away. You can see all your own data that you have collected, and then today's cloud measurements, and then current data. But you'll always have that little reminder in the lower left-hand corner of the bar graph, letting you know that you have an observation that has not been uploaded yet.
Great. Well, we're running out of time here. My goodness.
We are. And I can wrap up in just a second here. So the website is globe.gov, and I want you to make sure that you have that there. You can get your account under Get Started. And then to find us on the web, we'll have the link for you. If you're in a museum or science center and you're looking for a great one-page, 4-step description of what this whole program is about, we have this as a PDF file, and we also have it as an interactive and e-publication. It works best on iPads, and each of the 4 tabs are a little bit of interactive where the exclamation points are, but you can see what the steps are. It's a nice handy reminder. Future webinars, we have education, and we have the Citizen Science Globe Observer webinars. February 20th is our next one for Citizen Science on Phenology Project, and Rusty will demonstrate how to make a larva trap. And so to get ready for that one, bring your empty 2-liter bottle and work along with us. February 6th, we have the next Globe Educator Workshop on completing science projects and research outcomes. We have quite a robust webinar series for you. If you're not able to attend, all of our webinars are archived. But if you'd like questions answered during the webinar, of course you can do that too. In summary, creating your own Globe Observer account. To create your account, check your email for a password. If you want to change it to something less crazy, choose Forget Password and then reset and make a new one. And then to download the app, it's Globe Observer, /get the app. There'll be some useful links. Again, getting a Globe Observer account. We have online training, e-training, if you'd like to know more about mosquito larvae and using the Globe Observer Mosquito Habitat Mapper module. There's e-training available. And then the last one is the one that we'd really like you to take a look at, and that's our GLOBE Mission Mosquito webpage. And so it's globe.gov/web/mission-mosquito. And you can go and find out all kinds of things. We have an Ask a Scientist discussion page. If you'd like to ask Rusty or any of the other scientists with our project questions, you can do that. They get back to you in pretty fast turnaround. And we have mosquito printable resources. And if you come next week, we've got a demonstration further of what's available for you. With that ends my part of the show, Rusty.
Great. We've had lots of great questions. I've been typing frenetically, trying to get them all answered. You are just a really delightful group. Thank you so much for coming to this webinar. I hope I can promise that next time we will not have any technical difficulties. We wouldn't believe the windstorm we're having here. You probably can hear the wind from my house. It's pretty insane. But I also wanted to let you know that it seems like you've been drinking out of a fire hose today with all these different details. Because the webinar is going to be archived, you can go and find those links without having to remember what they are and get yourself going, get the app installed. And if you have any problems, Dorian and Cassie and I are all here willing to help you. So please go ahead and ping us if you need any help. And the next webinar, we're really going to focus on talking about how we can all begin to make some observations together. We'll talk a little bit more about the mosquito phenology, the mapping project, and we'll also tell you what to bring so you can make a mosquito trap during the webinar.
Sorry, Rusty, I'd like to add that when we talked about making the phenology map and everything, that's our question to you, but I know that you might probably have questions about mosquitoes and you'd like help and from others in our group to get data. And that's what it's all about, is working with everybody's questions and everybody working together. So think of us as a big family, and we're all working together for the same end, to ask different questions and to do some research together.
Thank you, Cassie. That really does, I think what you just said embodies the spirit of this citizen science and many citizen science projects. So once again, thanks again for all your time. Sorry we ran a little bit over. That won't happen next time. But do come back to us with your questions and comments, and we'll do some real tangible things next time. So great. Thanks a lot, everyone.